Good evening, and welcome to Parody Name for Masterpiece Theater. Tonight, we're going to take a journey into a modern novel full of swords, shadows, and fedoras. A modern novel so highly regarded that some people even try to steal it and claim it as their own. We're looking at AJ Vega's Soul Census. So, gather round by the fire, cuddle up, and get ready to explore the wonderful world of literature. Chapter 1, Soul Census. Subchapter, New Recruit. Earth date, 8th of April, 1933, Common Era. Location, New York City, USA, Earth. Reflections in the rain puddles painted the same ugly picture he tried to avoid seeing directly. With each step, the dilapidated building shook, the streetlights shimmered, and the sky retreated, as if distancing itself from the scum on the ground. A dark figure in the water stared back at him, an observer, lurking above the reflected world around him. Wilhelm Maddock tried to avoid the figure, trying instead to imagine that man, himself, in better surroundings. Perhaps the green fields of the Western Front, even if it did mean dodging the black plumes of death in the exploding air around him. But there was no avoiding this place he was in now, gradually pushed into this rat maze of a city by the decisions he'd made. The eager mouse, he was chasing that elusive cheese. His stomach growled angrily, reminded of its barren emptiness. Why'd he have to think about cheese? Maddock tore his vision from the wet ground as his ears picked up a familiar sound, a scream for help. Without hesitating, he followed the sound to a nearby alleyway, where he was presented with an all too familiar scene. His senses dissected the caper into its particulars. Two men beating a third, surrounded by the sounds of fists thudding into wet fabric and flesh. A woman stood beside a lamppost, stretching her arms out, crying and yelling for help. Maybe the victim's dame. The hoods ignored her, as did the cowards who crossed past the alleyway, pretending to hear nothing. These were tough times, and Maddock had his own problems, but he was no match for his own conscience. And sleep is hard to come by as it is. Reaching into his pocket, he slipped his fingers into a pair of brass knuckles, one of the few possessions he had not pawned. Taking in a breath, he left the safety of the shadows and entered into the fray. Two men continued their deed, unaware of his approach. Maddox sized them up briefly. They both looked like typical hoods. One was dealing the beating, was of average build, and wore a white fedora that somehow stayed on his head despite the wild swings he made as he landed his blows. The other was tall and lanky, with kinky dark hair that seemed to drip a mixture of rain and dirt. He held the victim by one arm, bullying him into the wall with his shoulder, as if the poor lug needed to be secured at this point. As for the victim, the blood splatter on his face and clothing was all he advertised. Maddock dove at the one administrating the beating, grabbing him by the shirt collar and landing a solid blow to his jaw. He felt and heard the chin music of a loud crack, signaling a broken jaw. The follow-up kick to the midsection was more for pleasure than necessity. The lanky one threw a weak punch at Maddock. He saw it coming, but rather than dodge it, he grabbed the wrist with his left hand and pulled him off balance, causing the guy to fall on his face. Not satisfied with his gravity having all the fun, Maddock kicked the hood, flipping him over, then grabbed him by the chest, fabric and some skin in hand. He pulled him up to his feet, ignoring the way the hood was screaming like a dame. 3 solid brass knuckle shots later, Maddock threw the slime ball to the ground and let the rain wash him into the sewers. Turning his attention to the victim, he bent down and checked his face. Some bad bruises, a couple gashes, but nothing too serious. The blows seemed to be concentrated on his stomach. They hadn't been trying to kill him. Just make him feel real bad. The man lurched over and upchucked on the ground, so they'd apparently succeeded on that front. Relax, Maddock said, pulling him to his feet. Breathe. The girl came over and assaulted Maddock with one thank you after another and urged him to let them fix him a nice meal in appreciation. Did he look that much like a bum? Just beat it, Maddock said, before these bimbos recover. They continued to insist on the meal until Maddock finally yowled and threatened to continue what the other two had started. They stopped being nice and ran off, disappearing into the streets under the cover of rain. Maddock looked up. The rim of his boater traversed the sky, exposing his face to the elements. Cold drops of rain poured down his neck, and he suppressed a shiver. A flash of lightning cracked in the sky, painting a distant world hidden in the clouds. He closed his eyes as the thunder rumbled in his ears. The vibration traveled up his legs, and his hands trembled. He reflectively clenched the joystick of a SPAD 8 that was not there. The sound of his twin Vickers machine guns echoed in his mind. When he released the trigger, he saw the wings of his unintended target, the round blue and white emblems of another SPAD 8, spewing black smoke on its way to a fiery death. Maddock forced his eyes open and glanced around. He was not in the air over Europe. This was New York City, and the Great War was over. He walked over to a nearby building, overhang, and leaned against the wall to shield himself from the rain. In the alley ahead of him, the two hoods were groaning and coming to their feet. Maddock should have probably scammed already, but instead, he casually lit up a Lucky Strike and took a drag. The taller hood stood up and immediately went over to the other to help him up. The shorter one pushed him off, ordering him instead to retrieve his hat. Maddock looked down at the ground, noticing the fedora was only a few steps away. The sap stomped over and noticed Maddock for the first time. At first, he gave Maddock just a minor scowl. Then sudden recognition hit him, and his eyes got wide. He scrambled back to his partner, leaving the fedora behind. They whispered for a moment before turning towards Maddock. You're dead, the leader said as he stepped towards Maddock. Halfway to him, he turned around and realized his taller partner was gone. Maddock flicked the cigarette at him. The hood froze, looking around for a getaway. So what was your beef with that couple? Maddock said. The hood did not give an answer, and instead took off running. Maddock could have stopped him, but a scared cat was not a fight. Disappointed, he slipped his brass knuckles into his jacket and continued his original trek back onto the main street. As he traversed the sidewalk, he felt something, a pair of unseen eyes staring at him. He glanced at the reflection of a shop window as he passed and saw a suited figure about 20 paces behind him. Undeterred, Maddock kept walking, slipping his hand back into his jacket for the safety of his brass knuckles again. He missed having his revolver with him, but he had to pick between having enough money for a decent outfit that might help him land a job or a gun that would only get him into trouble. And he chose the chance at a job, yet the trouble always seemed to follow him. Maddock ducked into the next alley, a dead end, but that was fine with him. His life had reached a dead end anyway. He'd finished the war an ace, a knight of the sky. The same people who had treated him like a war hero when he returned now treated him like an outcast when the jobs dried up. Battling what Hoover called a Great Depression had become Maddock's next war. He stopped halfway into the alley and started to turn around, ready to dare whatever was coming for him. Come on, pal, I haven't got all day, Maddock said as he turned around, but the stranger was not there. Maddock chuckled. He had not had a good meal in him for days. Maybe he was seeing things. Captain Wilhelm Maddock, a voice said behind him. He whirled around, jumping a few feet back, then slipping and falling onto the ground. Maddock looked up, feeling his face flush with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Relax, Matty, the stranger said. I'm not here to hurt you. Maddox scrambled to his feet, and despite the seemingly friendly intro, launched himself at the stranger. Before he could reach him, he felt a sudden shock, electric maybe. His body fell limp to the ground, but he was still fully conscious. His muscles tightened up uncontrollably. He tried to fight it, to regain control, but found himself just curling into a fetal position instead. Sorry about that, the man said. Maddock noted he held something in his hand. It looked like a gun. Try not to fight the stun. It only makes it worse. It will wear off soon. Maddox saw the man kneel down next to him. The stranger wore a full four-piece suit with an expensive-looking Homburg hat. He had an oval face with green eyes, along with the round-rimmed glasses. He had a strange accent, too. That was a bit unexpected, back there with those two. Quick work. That I expected. But you didn't bother to make friends with the couple? Turn down a good meal, even? You just sent them on their way and continued to starve instead, eh? Maddock felt his muscles go numb and tingle, the same feeling someone would get when their leg falls asleep. Maybe he would regain control soon and bring this bastard down to the ground with him. I'm not interested in making new friends, Maddox said. Already had my share of them in this life. The stranger raised an eyebrow. An interesting choice of words, Matty. Maddock heard footsteps. He managed to turn his head to get a better look. It was a man and a woman walking up to them, the couple he'd saved earlier. Here's that chance to make friends, the stranger said. Maybe get a good meal in you? So they're with you, Maddox said. You're a torpedo or something? The stranger laughed. No, Matty, I wasn't hired to kill you. I was hired to do something else, though. He motioned to the couple. Help me with him. The three of them pulled his body from the wet ground and balanced him on his feet. I'm sorry to meet you like this, the stranger said. My name is Agent Wolf. You see, my associates here were supposed to make friends with you, get to know you, profile you to see if you would be a good fit for the Bureau. But all of that is shot to shit now, so we go with Plan B. Maddox studied Wolf. Something about him seemed off, but he couldn't place it. He had to be foreign. The Bureau, huh? Maddox said. So you're with Uncle Sam? I've had enough working for Uncle Sam. Wolf shook his head. Much more complicated than that. Uncle Sam doesn't run things where I'm from. Come on, flyboy, the woman said. Maddock looked at her and realized for the first time what pretty hazel eyes she had. You've just been drafted by Auntie Sam, the woman continued, and she's really impatient about these things. A black Studebaker pulled into the alley, its lights off. Before Maddock could say another word, he felt another shock, and this time he did lose consciousness. Subchapter Awakening. Maddock peered over the side of the cockpit, watching his young patrol give chase, too inexperienced to realize what they were really chasing. He tried to get their attention, but the hunger to score a first kill against the Huns was a feeling he remembered all too well. It overpowered any sense of discipline. Maddock zoomed his SPAD 8 up just as the other six continued to blindly give chase to the decoy. As he leveled the plane, he scanned the draping blue sky and cloud banks around him, trying to look for the enemy. It didn't take long for him to see the Boche, 12 of them, in Fokker D-7s, and stalking over his squadron. The trap had not yet been sprung, but soon it would be. Maddock banked hard to the left, kicking the rudder and spiraling himself into a dive. The wind hit the small bits of exposed flesh on his face like itchy knives, and the stick vibrated in his hand as he clenched it hard to retain control of this plane. As he closed in on his quarry, he could see his gun sights gradually enclose the tail of the closest Hun. He waited patiently as the sights became filled with the fuselage of the Boche. Any second now, he fired his first burst as the tracers landed out on the Fokker. Another plane suddenly drove between them, nearly colliding with his SPAD and absorbing his shots. Maddock stopped firing and broke away, avoiding collision. As he fought the controls for a moment to straighten out, he scanned around for the enemy. It was then he saw the smoke trailing from another SPAD he had inadvertently riddled. The blue and white emblem on its wings cast one last glint of sunlight as it fell to its end. Earth date, 8th of April, 1933, Common Era. Location, Reflection Room, Soul Sphere, Earth. Maddock awoke. Sitting up slowly, he put his face in his hands, rubbing his eyes to dry them out. It was one of many nightmares he relived during every attempt to sleep. The day he'd killed one of his comrades. One of many accidents that took place during the Great War. Shaking off the memory, he focused on his surroundings. He was alone, lying on a crescent-shaped couch, situated in a bare room. It was dimly lit, and one wall was white. The other smoked glass. The white wall had a rough texture, like rock or ocean coral. Both floor and ceiling were black onyx, with an exotic swirling pattern above. There was no door, no apparent way in or out. "Where the hell am I?" Maddox stood up and looked down to examine himself. His clothes were filthy, and the trousers had a tear in them. It was then that the memories returned. The hoods in the alley, the fight, the agent, and the couple who kidnapped him and a Studebaker. "Can't keep going. So thirsty," came a voice from behind. Maddock whirled towards the source, something at the center of the room. It looked like a round bump on the ground with pulsating lights that seemed to float just above it. He moved closer to inspect it, and as he approached and focused on the lights, he realized that they were more than lights. It was a moving picture, like a film, but it was so much clearer, and in color. The film focused on a thin, barely dressed man in rags, roaming a desert expanse. The sky was bluer than any sky Maddock could remember, and the sun was boiling yellow. This was unlike any motion picture he had ever seen. "Just take me, God. Take me so I can see Siana again," the man said as he dropped to the ground. Maddock noticed that even though he heard the man speak, his lips did not move. It was as if the filmmaker was narrating his thoughts. Just then, Maddock heard footsteps and voices echo from outside the room, coming from the direction of one of the smoked glass walls. He went over to it, putting his ear to the wall to listen. There was no reaction to the live replay. "It looks like he doesn't remember," said a familiar man's voice. "Are we certain of this?" a female voice said. "The timing must be right." There was a chuckle from the other, and now Maddock realized the familiar voice sounded like that Agent Wolf character. This solid is as dense as a rock," Wolf said. "Trust me, he's far removed from enlightened." "He's awake," the woman interrupted. "He can hear us." "Oops," Wolf said, just as a section of wall suddenly began to give away. Maddock jumped back, his left hand diving to the pocket, searching for his knuckles, only to realize that they had been taken from him. The wall bulged out like a bubble, and, like a water bubble, seemed to pop as the two figures stepped into the room. The wall retreated behind them, sealing the hole that had been there a moment ago. Maddock froze, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. "Sorry about that," Wolf said. "You weren't supposed to wake up for another hour." He smiled. "You really are a tough son of a bitch." Wolf was wearing the same four-piece suit and those thin-rimmed glasses. Next to him was the woman from the con in the alley. She was wearing a strange-looking outfit, a cross between a man's suit and a skirt, but the top was parted a little, enough to reveal the fact that she did have bulbs. Like Wolf, her outfit was mostly black, with highlights in white. She gave Wolf a stern look, and at that grin on his face faded rather quickly. It almost seemed as if she was the one calling the shots around here. "I apologize for this agent's crass words," she said. "My proper name is Samantha Black, but you will refer to me by my title of Director, and Director Black is also appropriate." "So that whole caper back there was staged?" Maddox said. "What happened to that bum I was rescuing? He worked for you too?" If you mean Agent Mason, Black said, yes, I'm sure you will see him again. Look, Mr. Maddock, I know this is all probably seems very strange to you, but Agent Wolf was sincere when he told you that we are not here to hurt you. We are here to help you, to offer you a job even. Maddock waved his hand. Wait a second, Dame. Director, Agent Wolf barked. Maddock had the urge to drive those glasses through his skull. It's okay, Agent, Black said, seeming to detect Maddock's sudden rage. He deserves some latitude. Let him speak. I deserve some latitude, Maddox said. I deserve to rip you two apart and burst out of here. You better start spilling a good story, or I'm gonna start cracking heads. Black looked at him impassively. She did not seem at all frightened. I was attempting to do just that when you interrupted and insulted me by calling me a dame, she said. But I am letting that go, as I understand this is all very strange and unexpected for you. She walked over to the couch and sat. Come on, she said, her expression softening. Let's sit together and talk. We will need your full attention, as there is much we must go over. Subchapter, Orientation. Earth date, 8th of April, 1933, Common Era. Location, Reflection Room, Soul Sphere, Earth. Maddock listened as the director and Wolf spilled it. Stuff about life and death, something called reincarnation, and some dingus called a soul sphere. He rubbed his temples, trying to will a throbbing headache away. Are we boring you, Wilhelm? Wolf said. Maddock glared at him, something about the way he said it. Before any of the suits could react, Maddock charged at Wolf, grabbing him by the collar and bullying him into the wall. Mr. Maddock, he heard Black say. He was up close to Wolf, who stared back with a smirk that demanded a pasting. Just as Maddock pulled back his fist to land one, the wall caved in, like a stretching rubber. The two of them went falling through it, outside of the room. They landed on the floor in the hallway. Maddock lifted himself up slowly, taking in his new surroundings. The hallway went down about 20 feet in both directions and was similar to the room in appearance. Same black onyx floors and walls that were either smoked glass or matte white. One different thing, though, was the ceiling. It draped down in waves, almost like a fabric hung from it, but the texture looked more like seashells. Wolf jumped up before Maddock and rather unexpectedly offered him a hand. Maddock slapped it away, glowering at him on his way to standing. Maddock, Black said, stepping in between them, do you want a job, or do you want to go back into the streets and be a rat food? In the better light of the hallway, he could not help but notice her pretty hazel eyes, along with the silky black hair that hung past her shoulders. As he looked down, he noticed upon closer inspection, she had nice bulbs. Are you listening to me, she said, snapping her fingers in his face. Up here. A group of agents cowered in on both sides of the hallway, all dressed like Wolf. Maddock counted about 7. Some appeared to be carrying heaters. Might be good fight if it wasn't for the guns. I could easily have shoved you back into the streets to starve and die, she said. Bullshit, Maddox said. I was on my way to getting a good job when I had to save you and your goof from getting pastored into that alley. Black tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. Maddox could tell that she was not believing it. Truth was, she was right. He really did not have any future out there. He glanced around at the strange place, the agents, and finally settled his sights on her. This was an unexpected evening, and for once, it was a set of events he could not predict, and he liked that. All right, on 2 conditions, he said, then looked up, thinking. Actually, make that 3 conditions. You're in no position to make, Black started, but he cut her off. First, I don't want to hear any more history lessons. I learn better by doing, so just throw me into the fry and I'll learn as I go. Black crossed her arms and nodded silently. 2, I need some Java and a ciggy. I haven't had either in hours. I get real mean without them. Fine then, she said. And 3? That was already 3, Wolf jumped in. Java and a ciggy, that's 2 things. I guess he can't count, Black said. Go on, Mr. Maddock. Spill it so we can get this over with. Maddock walked up to Wolf, who tried to step back, but this time his back was against the wall that didn't bulge. Holding him by his collar, Maddock brought him up close, face to face. He smiled as Wolf twitched. 3, Maddock said. I gotta have one of these here spiffy suits. All right, and that's where we'll end it for right now. There's a image for the next sub chapter. So, anyways, that's the first time I read it. It's pretty goofy, but let's see how it turns out. And also, if anybody out there is a Rax animator and they want to animate this story but have Rax be the main character, I would love to see that. That would be something that I think lots of people would. So, to anyone out there who likes to do animation, here's a good opportunity for you. So anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys later.